Over the course of the last week or so, I've been making some behind-the-scenes changes to my setup and how I record my gameplay footage as a whole, more specifically my retro consoles. And let me tell you, a lot of shit took place, and I'll be sure to fill you in on what's been going on. First, however, I'd like to briefly talk about some old methods I use to record games, then talk about the new pieces of equipment I've picked up, and give you an idea on the quality of content you can expect from this channel. Let me first explain that before talking about any of this, one awesome piece of equipment I purchased, the main talking point of this video, was the RetroTINK-2X Pro, a high-quality upscaling device built by a guy named Mike Chi. I bought this thing after watching videos about it from RetroRGB, Metal Jesus Rocks, and of course, My Life in Gaming. This video will go through my experience with the device over the past week, and hopefully, help you decide whether or not it's for you. But before that, let me quickly give you all a history lesson. Back in Christmas of 2013, I got my first laptop. It was a standard HP Windows 8 with the shittiest AMD processor you can think of. When I first started recording videos, I had no access to capture cards like Elgato's, AverMedia's, EasyCaps, etc. So I used what's called Microsoft Expression Encoder 4. It can record whatever is happening on your computer screen. You can set the recording window, adjust the volume, and even edit your videos using the software that comes with it. This was my first way of recording all of those old videos between 2014 and mid-2016. If you watched the episode of John's Reviews where we looked at my old videos, you'll know which ones I'm talking about. Around June-ish 2016, I purchased my first capture device, the Elgato Game Capture HD, which I continue to use up until now, but more on that later. I was so excited to get everything set up to record footage for the Crash Warped review, only to find out my old TV at the time, a 32-inch Vizio from 2012, didn't accept 240p resolutions over HDMI, meaning I couldn't record PS1 games. So I went online and found a really cheap piece of plastic that can take the composite input and blow it up to HDMI compatible resolutions like 720p or 1080p. My PS1 issue was solved. Although looking back at it, this thing did such a piss-poor job at upscaling. The footage recorded for most of the Crash reviews needed this thing in order to be done, and it made the footage look just gross. Not to mention the amount of noise it adds to the picture, both visually and audibly. I grew sick of this thing until finally I took it upstairs and used it on our Atari Flashback. It hasn't been back since, because I later purchased this upscaler from EasyCell. This thing did better than the old one, that's for sure, and for the longest time, I honestly just went with it, as it was doing the job real well. However, I eventually looked at my footage and said to myself, this does look pretty good, but it can look better. That's when I decided to look into more professional upscalers. I looked at the three main contenders, the XRGB Mini, or FrameMeister if you will, the open source scan converter, and of course, the RetroTINK devices. I actually did try getting my hands on a FrameMeister, but after contacting the seller on eBay, I learned that it never made it overseas, most likely due to COVID-19, as it shipped moments before the outbreak last March. Thankfully, the guy gave me a full refund, which was nice. It's a shame too, because I actually managed to get my hands on a component to D-terminal adapter. I bought this thing for the FrameMeister, assuming I would get the FrameMeister, so unfortunately, it stays in the packaging until I somehow find a use for it. Next on the table was the OSSC, which I immediately ruled out for one reason and one reason only. Composite was nowhere to be found on this device, nor was S-Video. Why is that important? Because I live in North America, and here, our GameCubes don't natively support RGB, and the GameCube I bought is not a DOL-001, meaning I don't have a digital output to use component cables. So the OSSC is out of the equation, which leaves only one survivor, the RetroTINKs. I spent some time thinking about which one I should go for. Do I save some money and just get the 2X Pro, or spend the money to get the 5X, giving my savings account a heart attack in the process? Ultimately, I settled with the 2X Pro because I already bought a new Elgato device, the HD60S, which has been really good. About a week later, it arrived in a standard, uneventful white box on the same day as my physical pre-order of Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. How's that for perfect timing? Now, I do know there is a multi-format version that works better with the consoles I'm aiming for, but that device was out of stock, and who knows when it'll be back. So I just went with the 2X Pro. Anyway, let's get more into detail on what this thing can do. Now, just a heads up, this is just going to be an overview of the device, followed by my experience with it. So if you're looking for a little more in-depth video, be sure to check out the My Life in Gaming review. A link to it is available in the description. Anyway, let's check this thing out. As you can see, it looks really nice. The device can take composite, component, and S-video inputs. Essentially, it line doubles 240p to 480p and uses Bob deinterlacing for 480i content, giving you a clean 480p output. This might cause a slight bobbing on the screen, hence the term, but it's only apparent when a game is not in motion. Honestly, I can adjust. Remember to keep your expectations realistic with this thing. If you're using composite, don't expect anything incredibly mind-blowing. It's still composite, but the RetroTINK products are known for how well they handle composite. The device itself retails on the RetroTINK website at around $130 US, which can then be jumped up to $137 if you want a Nintendo S-video cable included. Unlike its mini counterpart, however, there is no choice of color for the shell. I don't mind the clear case, but it would have been nice to have different options so everybody can pick and choose based on their preference. But that's just a silly gripe of mine, not anything significant. Anyway, let's check this bad boy out. On the front is the component input. At first glance, you might wonder where composite went. Well, the green Y port actually doubles up as a yellow composite port, making it look very presentable. On the left side is the S-video port, right underneath the LED light that displays what input is selected. Yellow for composite, green for component, and white for S-video. On the right side, we have two tiny switches, and when I say tiny, I'm not kidding. These things are puny. The first switch toggles the mode of the device, either line 2X or pass, which passes the original signal through and lets your TV do the rest if it can properly deinterlace 480i or accept 240p. The other switch is the comb filter toggle with two settings, retro or auto. From what I tested, both modes turned in practically the same results. I leave the switches on retro and line 2X. On the back, we have a micro USB power supply, which can be powered using your TV's USB port. It also allows for easy installation of firmware updates. Holding down the input button while hooking the device up to the PC will give you a red light. If you see it, you did it right, and with a few clicks, the update is flashed onto the device and you're ready to go. We also have a full-size HDMI output, and next to it, there are two buttons. One to switch inputs, as I briefly mentioned a second ago, and the other to apply a smoothing filter. With this button, you can either leave the smoothing alone, apply the smoothing, or apply artificial scan lines. All of this is simple plug-and-play technology, as you don't have to spend over $350 on a device you have to tweak after each individual game, to the point where you just give up. The FrameMeister is very time-consuming, and for people like myself, I just cannot do this. The simplicity and convenience are what steal the show for RetroTINK. This device, along with everything else, ultimately goes to my HDMI splitter, which then splits the signal two ways. I have one going directly into my second PC monitor, and another one going to the HD60S. Now let's check out some gameplay. What you are looking at right now is the Easy Cell Upscaler's quality, which, like I said before, isn't bad, but could be better. It's composite upscale to 720p at 60 frames per second. Now here is the RetroTINK-2X Pro's quality. Its component on the PS2 deinterlaced to 480p, also at 60 frames. This looks pretty sweet. The PS2 is component, while the GameCube is S-video, since that is my only other option. And holy shit, just look at this gameplay. It's fucking amazing. I was blown away when I saw how incredible this game looked. That said, setup for the RetroTINK-2X Pro is fairly simple. All of the systems and their games work as you would expect them to. However, I noticed one problem when it came to recording PS1 games. and it caused many a fucking headache for me. For whatever reason, 240p PS1 games on the RetroTINK output at 59 frames per second. At first I didn't think this was a big deal. It was then I discovered something. The HD60S does not like any frame rate lower than 60. The audio slowly starts to get further and further away from the footage, and the preview window starts to have a conniption fit. 480i games like Tekken 3 work just fine, but 240p line double to 480p causes this mess. Not even unchecking the 60 FPS box to just record at 30 was able to fix this issue. I was stuck, so I looked for alternative solutions. I discovered and purchased the AverMedia Live Gamer Mini GC311 and used that to record PS1 games. However, there are two major problems with this thing, and let me tell you, they are absolute deal breakers. First, the LGM does not like HDMI splitters, meaning if I wanted to record PS3 content, I can't. The other major problem is that despite the ReCentral software showing a 60 FPS output, and the preview window even displaying the games at 60, the footage was recorded at 30 frames per second. Now, this may not be a big deal for most people, as most big hitters only run at 30 FPS, but I have an issue with it. Why? Because Puyo Puyo Sun runs at 60 FPS, so this was just not going to work. At that point, I was completely lost and looked on Google to see if anybody had a fix for it. As usual, nothing. So, what the fuck do I do now? The HD60S gets pissed when the frame rate is lower than 60, and the LGM is an outright fucking lie. I felt kind of defeated. That was until I discovered a neat homebrew tool for the PS2, the Graphics Synthesizer Mode Selector. This software allows you to force your PS2 to HD resolutions, such as 720p and 1080i, using your component cables. It can also force a progressive scan for all 480i content. There is one problem with using this on PS1 games, though. 240p games end up being squished into this really weird-looking letterbox, which is just unacceptable for me. And re-stretching it in post-production would make it look really messy. Then I discovered that the GSM also has a mode designed specifically for PS1 titles. Pressing X forces PS1 games to a fake 480p scan. Of course, I had to do some troubleshooting with the screen offset, but after about 20 minutes, I figured out the perfect configuration. Setting the X offset to -100 and the Y offset to -4 recenters the picture perfectly. The PlayStation logo will appear stretched due to it being 480i, but once you jump back into 240p, the picture looks great, and the Elgato HD60S sees it as a 480p output at 60 frames per second. Problem solved. This means the Live Gamer Mini is now downgraded to being simply a backup device, just in case things go awry with the HD60S. Now, here's one problem this homebrew tool introduces. Because this stretches 480i, menus in games like Chrono Cross or Destruction Derby Raw have a lot of important stuff cut off, making them virtually unplayable. This isn't a major issue, as I only have games that output exclusively in either 240p or 480i. However, if I ever pick up one of these games, I will go ahead and just play it on the PS3, as the internal upscaling allows for a seamless transition between resolutions. So, while the process to get Puyo Puyo Sun properly recorded at 60 FPS was kinda ass backwards, it was well worth it in the long run. So after jumping through all those hoops, I finally have the ideal setup for my retro consoles. My Wii at the moment is just for show, but once I get it refurbished, that will go to the RetroTINK-2X Pro via component, just like the PS2. I've got S-Video for my GameCube and everything else is HDMI. Soon I'll invest in a couple 5-port HDMI switches from Kinevo. That way I can daisy chain one to the other for a total of 9 inputs. I'm also looking into a component switch, but I don't necessarily need it at this time. I do want those Kinevo switches though, to help cut down wear and tear in the long run. Now that we've talked about all that, allow me to answer the question that is most likely on your mind. Is this thing worth $130? Yes, it is. Keep in mind, it's only a 2x scale to 480p, so if that's good enough for you, I highly recommend it, and it makes everything look gorgeous. Like, seriously, just look at that! However, if you already have a high-quality upscaler like the OSSC or the FrameMeister, just stick with that. Obviously, whatever the RetroTINK-2X Pro can do, those devices are more than capable of. But the biggest selling point for this thing is the simplicity of plugging it in and playing right away, and the convenience of having the more common connections. Hopefully you don't have to worry about the whole 59 frame shenanigans like I did. The price tag definitely goes a long way as well, as it is roughly $250 less than the FrameMeister. If you're interested in a RetroTINK upscaler and you can't get your hands on a 5X due to pre-orders filling up instantly, the 2X Pro is a solid option. And for anybody who just wants good quality composite or S-video, the 2X Mini is right up your alley. This thing has revitalized my love for these systems, and I cannot wait to get back into playing these games and seeing them look the best they've ever looked. But anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like down below. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments and I will answer them as soon as I can. And until the next time, I'm Junior Nitro, reminding you to do something useful with your spare time.